What's up, guys? Connor O'Hanlon here today, again with another episode of the Con O Show. And today I am joined by Kaya Plummer, who is someone who just gave an amazing speech the other day at the second, or depends on how you want to count the amount of protests we've had here in our town, in Doylestown. But she gave an amazing speech to close out the day at the end of the protest that we had. And I really wanted to reach out because, one, I thought she was at least my age, which was shocking when that she was just graduating high school. And I was really blown away by the structure and the power in that speech. So, Kyle, welcome, and thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. Yes, like you said, my name is Kaya Plummer. I'm 17. I just graduated from Central Bucks West High School, so I am literally fresh out. Thank you for having me. This is an amazing opportunity. This is a progressive show. It's not like, just sticking to one thing like liberal or super conservative. Like we're young people, because some of these parties are stagnant parties. So you want to be able to progress into this future that we have as the next generation. So I'm ready. Yeah.
And then so the group that organized the protest, can you tell me a little bit about that group and how you got involved?
So I'm gonna be completely honest with you. I don't know the exact group that had planned this protest, but I was reached out by one of them, and she asked me, she said, "Are you attending the protest?" And I was like, "I was thinking about it, I don't really know." And she was like, she's like, "Can you please deliver a speech?" I'm like, "Sure," all right, I guess I'll be in attendance, and just give my testimonial and my experience and just the logistics side of what's happening in our world and what's going wrong and what we can do to fix it. So when she reached out, I was like, you know what, I'm here for it. There's not a lot of Black people in our community, in our town. So just to be a voice of reason and just a voice of passion at that, I just had to say yes.
Did they know that you were such a good speaker? I mean, how did they know? Because the group I assume is just Doylestown Youth for Unity, which is how I found the protest and everything like that. I just look at social media, but
Right.
I don't know who reached out to you, but are you known for giving speeches?
Honestly, no. I've always been, well-spoken and stuff like that. I do short videos, and just my mannerism and how I talk to people in conversation. I guess that's how it really just comes across, the way I talk. But I don't think any of these people have ever heard me actually give a speech before. So it was.
Are you in theater or something like that? Because you do have a great cadence. I don't know. There's something to it. I don't know. It didn't seem like you were reading, which I know you were looking at a speech, but it doesn't seem like you were reading. It seemed like you were, I mean, obviously it's powerful, but
right.
Anything like that?
No, I'm not a theater kid. I am a granddaughter of a rabbi, and I have a very clergy family. So power and conviction is always in our boys. So, being nervous just definitely wasn't a thing for me, but I mean, just the idea of getting up there, I had the little nerve, I don't know the reaction. But once I start talking and I'm passionate about something, it's it's going. And I am glad, I'm very thankful that my message got across and it touched a lot of people at the end of the day. But no, that it just runs in the family. That power and conviction, it's bloodline.
You can see, and I'm gonna link. If anyone's listening and they want to hear the speech, I'll link it on Facebook, and I'll reply with it. There's a YouTube video of the speech. You can see in the video that I feel like you didn't realize how quickly people were gonna be on your side in a sense. It was like,
Yeah.
you're like taken back by, oh wow, they're cheering, like,
Yes, the first clap. I was like, oh, okay. Okay.
which I thought was awesome. I mean, because it's, you're just talking how you feel, so
Right.
you never do know how people are going to react. And I was part of organizing. Well, people say that I organized not the first, the one that was in Doylestown by Starbucks, and you know, to see like for 2 weeks basically now, people consistently speaking out and trying to just push forward a message,
Right.
is been inspiring. I mean, and luckily, the one that we had this past week, there wasn't very many counter protests. There wasn't many people that the All Lives Matter crowd, all that.
Right. Right.
So I think it was great. And I'm gonna go through. I listened to your speech again before we came on here, and there's some things that stood out, and I just want to go through and ask you some questions about, and something stood out to me that were pretty powerful. So it goes in chronological order of how you were giving your speech. So
Okay.
if anyone wants to listen as we're going through, or like stagger it. But the first thing that stood out to me was when you said, because we've all heard the phrase white silence equals violence, but you didn't start out by saying that. You said white silence equals white consent, which leads to white violence. Is there a reason why you said it that way? And I particularly found that interesting, and I have my opinions on why that's so great, but like, is there a reason why you started off that way?
How do I put this? So just the whole idea of when you remain silent, truly in times of injustice and just wrong, and specifically right now, you are allowing the consent part, you are allowing for people to continue to spread their hate and their ignorance. And with the consent of the vocal part of it comes the violence part of it. You're consenting to allow these people to spread their hate by being silent, but now you're consenting to them being able to put their hands on people and use their anger and their aggression as their voice. So I thought I should include this because it's so important for people to understand that you have to speak out in times like this. You have to vocalize when things are wrong. There's no need for you to sit silent, especially if it's not just, one person vocalizing, oh, I'm hurt, but it's a whole group of people saying, hey, we're being targeted and we need you to help us because, we've been silenced for so long as a people. And I did mention this in my speech. I said I had to remain silent as a young Black girl, something along the lines of that, to not be seen as an angry Black woman. And it just goes to show how often you can have hate thrown at you, but because of the way things have always been, you have to sit back and just sort of tolerate it and take it as a Black person. So it's just wise. It's just wise, and it's morally correct and ethical of white people to speak out when minorities, and specifically in this case Black people, are, vocalizing, hey, we need you. Like, that's the message. We need you.
It's interesting you pointed out. I'll want to emphasize it because I did write it down also. You said it's I don't know how you led into it, but you said whether it's interesting or it's sad, whatever, how often you have to be the quiet Black girl to not be perceived as the angry Black woman. I thought that was an applause line, but if I ever heard of one. But
yeah,
it's like you just mentioned that, but I want to emphasize that because it does play into stereotypes. And, I have a loud voice, but I'm a young white man. So the difference in saying, like, I was never told that I'm an angry white man. I mean, maybe I am, but I was never told that. And maybe maybe it's okay if we were angry, because I think there's justified reasons to be angry. But even
Correct.
if we are or we aren't, the stereotypes are perpetuated over and over and over again. So
Right.
that's why I do like that intro of, white silence equals white consent, which then leads to white violence, because
Hmm.
Martin Luther King talked about the white moderate, and he talked about how he basically said that the white moderate's worse because he at least knows where the racist stands. He knows where
Correct. Yes.
exactly. So he knows where I know you're against me, but the white moderate is someone that can make the change happen. And I've
Right.
heard, because they hold the power. It's the power dynamic.
Right.
It's always incumbent upon it's obviously people that are oppressed to stand up, but it's
Hmm.
really incumbent upon the oppressor or people that see the oppressor to stop
Hmm.
and to make that change happen, because we do have that power. But also stemming off of that, you mentioned because someone's white and they have white privilege doesn't mean that they don't suffer from life's problems. And one, that's sad that you had to mention that. But two,
Yeah.
I'm happy you did, because people take it as if you say you have white privilege or they have white privilege. I know I have white privilege, but yet I'm a 24-year-old millennial, and the economic circumstances that we live within are not great, regardless of your color. But it's
Right.
disproportionately affecting people that, someone that is black and my age. And I spoke to Chandler. I'm going to completely butcher his last name 2 weeks ago. And the difference between me and him we're 2 years separate, but yet his life experience is so much different. So
Hmm.
much. So I don't know if you want to expand upon that at all and just talk about, that part of your experience and saying like, you grew up around in Doylestown. I assume you've seen the differences in.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
Do you want to speak
It,
to that, like your experience versus, your white schoolmates, I guess, because you're
yeah.
17. So.
um. So, like you said, it was important to put this in there. Um, and it was important to highlight this because whenever I write something, I always envision what my crowd is going to look like. And it's not to try to win over white people or do something in a manner that it's more comfortable for them, but it's so you don't lose your audience. You always want to make sure that they're engaged when you're talking. So for me to say this, and I do realize that most of the people there were advocates, but it's also important for me to, just reiterate, listen, I understand that you suffer from life's problems because we all do, but it's important for you to understand that while you are going through your life's problems, the fact that you are a white person doesn't affect that whatsoever. As it could be if I compare myself to a white girl and we go in for a job, you know, the fact that, racism still happens within the workplace, whether it be your hair, I could wear an afro or have braids in my hair and people will tell you this is an inappropriate style. And I'm like, this is a part of our culture, and it's automatically canceled, but you can have credentials lined up, but because hate is still in the workplace, and even when you're filling out applications and they ask for your ethnicity, and you don't get calls back because they see that you checked off the box that said black or something of another minority. When you're white, you have that automatic privilege to get somewhere, and then they look at the credentials. But as a black person, it's to some workplaces it's about standards. So we can't have black people. We can't, because some of the people we work with, they're not gonna like this, or they're not gonna like how we have this person working behind the scenes or the face of such and such. So it's such a problem that we really have to change, and that goes for anything. But my experience in Doylestown, I honestly had to check my privilege. I do have privilege. I had the privilege of going into a school system where we had great education, great education. And I know that basically 95% of my family lives in Philadelphia or the city area, where it's more so populated by minorities, and the education system is jacked. It is jacked. There are kids in 10th grade sharing textbooks, beaten up textbooks at that. These classes are, overpopulated. Like 40 kids in a classroom. How is a teacher supposed to have one-on-one connection with that? Teachers are underpaid too in the city. So I had to check my privilege because I'm sitting here talking to my cousins and stuff. And I realized, I'm like, oh my God, I'm really in a great system. And, we take that for granted a lot. People don't understand that when you're in the education system in the suburbs, you have access to so much. You have access to so much. And I wish a lot of people understood that, because when you are in the education system in the city, it lacks. It really does lack. You could be learning something that's college level in 11th grade in the suburbs, and you go in the 11th grade in the city and they're still doing basic algebra, from something that we would be learning in 7th grade. And it's sad. And it's something that we have to fix. We really have to, we all at some point have to check our privilege. White privilege does exist, but some people, even women, we have privilege in that regard. I'm not going to get into that one. It's a little touchy subject when it comes to sexual harassment. We have the privilege of speaking out against it, but most of the time it is true. But you can also be, create a false report and ruin a man's career. And you don't realize that your privilege is when you say something like that, people believe you because you're a woman, because that happens a lot. So at some point we have to hold ourselves accountable and like I said, just check our privilege.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. And I wrote down at the end, you mentioned, I'm jumping ahead to the end of your speech now, but you mentioned not all, but a lot of different ways that race and really race intersects with other issues. So it goes beyond. It says, so you were just talking about education, so that's what brought it up with me. Education, housing, public health, the wage gap, hiring, privatization of the police, and sexual harassment, and more. I think that we can go into every single one of those if we really wanted to, right. But specifically on the education piece, we also not only do we not pay teachers enough just broadly, but they have to do too much. They have to manage too many different things.
Right.
That, and our education system is busted because we don't teach people our actual history, or we don't teach them the full depth.
Yes, we sugarcoat a lot. We sugarcoat a lot.
Exactly. So, the fact that we only learn about, and this is very specific to I went to CBUS as well, so very much to my education. But like, it took me until 11th grade to really learn about any sort of actions with the civil rights movement, and really learn the horrors of slavery and Jim Crow. And even then, I still didn't get the full picture until I was reading like books on my own over the last 5 years. So I don't really know the answer beyond just saying like, we have to teach this. And I was in AP US history. So I can only imagine if you're not in those classes, you never understand that. And you never get the perspective of someone that doesn't look like you, because it's all Eurocentric.
Right.
So, but yeah, beyond that, we can go into, housing, public health, wage gap, hiring. You mentioned hiring too. I don't know off the top of my head the study, but it's a classic sociology study that, like, if you took Sociology 101, it would be like, here you go. This is like a classic example of showing like racial bias. And it's the hiring one. And it doesn't actually ask the person their ethnicity. It actually just has their name on it. And it was the a white name versus a black name. And the white person was hired, or even got calls back. I think it was more than 2 times as many. I mean, it's just absolutely insane.
Yeah, your name can't sound too black or you won't get the job.
Right.
It's crazy.
And then what I really liked next was that you said we're comfortable with confusing nationalism and patriotism. Do you want to kind of dive in on that before because I obviously have my.
I'm gonna let you go on that one. I'm gonna let you go. Go ahead.
So yeah, I mean, anybody that's listening to this, and if you guys haven't listened to any of my other shows before, I don't know what you're doing. Go listen to those shows. But has known that I rail, and I think probably mostly I did a Cult of Personality episode. And I talk a lot about that line of nationalism and patriotism. And you're giving a speech, so it's a little different. But to me, when we talk about nationalism today, it's mixed so much with it. It's mixed so much with the just racism and xenophobia.
Yes.
It's. I mean, that's why people call Trump a fascist. And that's really what I was going towards with saying that, is because that blend, all that blend kind of just, it's really, really bad. And that's why you get people saying that it's bad to use your First Amendment right to take a knee during a football game. And they skew that because literally using your First Amendment right is patriotic versus you're protesting the flag, you're protesting the national anthem, and that would be nationalism, basically, by saying you don't love our country, you don't stand. You're the symbolism of our country is more important than you actually exercising your rights.
Correct.
But you can take anything you want from that and run with it, or we can go from there. But that specific line, like, needed to be said, and I'm happy you did.
Correct.
It's very frustrating over and over and over again, but by saying that Colin Kaepernick didn't protest the flag. He was protesting police brutality. He wasn't protesting the national anthem. And yet when we have these peaceful protests here now, people still will be like, waving that American
no one's
flag
satisfied.
right in our face. Yep.
Yes. It is sad. It really is. I mean, and I actually had some people come to me and because I used to have arguments about this all the time. I'm like, I'm not disrespecting soldiers. I'm like, my grandfather was a Marine. I'm like, I got people in my family who are in the service right now. I'm not disrespecting them. I'm like, you give us rights and then you get mad when we when we use our rights. And then when it comes to the Second Amendment right, don't let me get started on that. You feel attacked when we come for you on that one, but we are not allowed to utilize our First Amendment right just to peacefully protest. No one's really ever satisfied with the way we speak up. And that's why, and when you say all lives matter and things like that, you're literally silencing the movement and just the fact that you want to silence someone trying to speak out in times of injustice just shows the person who you are and how comfortable you are with what this country lacks. We're supposed to be a superpower. We're supposed to be a country that other countries are supposed to look up to. And I did mention this in my speech. I said we meddle into other people's business all the time. I mean, all the time. We started wars over in the Middle East, and we're here, and I never thought I would be in a time and place. And I don't want to say exactly where my grandparents and stuff are, because I can never, I don't think we will ever get back to that sort of trauma that my grandparents and them been through and just past generations. But, here we are again. Fighting for something that we shouldn't have to fight for. This just should be something that's already in place. And I understand the whole idea of, slavery, whatever it happened. But at some point, even with the legalization and of allowing Black people to do certain things, at some point in time, there should have been a sit down. Hey, we need to start scratching out some things, rewriting some things. But there was there was never that. It was, hey, yeah, well, yeah, you can be a citizen, you can vote, you could do such and such, but nobody's ever really fighting for us, and that's the part that's so infuriating. And it's so infuriating. Black people are in a system that was not designed to fail or protect them. So we're stuck in the middle, and then you have our two parties, constantly going at it. And I don't mind the two parties at all, but at some point we do have to realize that these parties are, Republicans don't care, and Democrats at some point they start to exploit Black people. So it's at a point where we have to find common ground. Like, hey, we gotta do something about it, And my opinion with the whole thing, Republicans, I just think they just really don't care. They're the ones who gets everything done, but does it all out of malice or malevolence. And then you have the Democratic Party, who has all the right ideas, and but either we're getting blockaded to not get it done, or we're just hesitant to do so. So
ding, 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 ding.
Right. At some point we just gotta, we gotta have a global forum, like sit down, like we need to start discussing these things, especially this generation now, because even though we, some white people, they grew up with prejudice and bigoted parents, you still got time to dig yourself out that hole of having that mindset for the rest of your life, And I said we need to start exposing racist teens, and I meant that with everything in me, because at the rate, I saw a post that said, at the rate that police officers are killing our Black men, that is the same rate that our healthcare providers are killing our Black women when it comes to either be birth or just simple care. It is time to start taking people out of these positions who just blatantly don't care. And it's sickening that we have to have this discussion, but we just really got to keep fighting for change, because it is so needed. It's so needed.
Well, not to fully close on everything, but that is why I came up to you and to asked you to run for office someday. As you might be able to see, Kaya, but no, I don't use the video for this. I have my campaign yard sign behind me, and I ran as a Democrat, and I am a part of the Democratic Party now.
Mm-hmm.
And there is that line of some of the older school Democrats don't want to fight as hard as some of the younger Democrats.
Correct.
And that's,
Correct.
I'm trying to be very walk that line right now.
Right.
Because to be frank, I don't think that the Affordable Care Act is enough. I don't think that canceling some student loan debt is enough. I don't think that touching here and there on the environment is enough. I don't think that just paying lip service on civil rights or just banning chokeholds is enough. And we need people like you and I, that's the way I see it at least, that are willing to fight and have these conversations with people that necessarily don't agree with us. And I don't know where you stand on, I never asked you about what you believe on all these other different issues, but I know, at least on this one issue, I assume we can fight on other ones together, but on this one issue, we need to demand more. It can't just be, ban chokeholds, because that's what a lot of the people are pushing for. That is the bare minimum that we can ask for. And then, but yeah, so I think we're in a weird time where a lot of the parties, well, especially the Democratic Party, is going through a little bit of a turning over new leadership into. So I think going forward, I mean, it's the reason why I run as a Democrat, because I believe in the principles of the Democratic Party, but I think we need to fight harder. We need
Correct.
to fight for what we truly believed in. It's like taking FDR and taking these people that had and FDR is flawed, don't get me wrong, but these people had the right ideas when it comes to wealth inequality. Because when we talk about wealth inequality, and I don't want to misquote this, but it takes multiple generations for it would take, in theory, if you paused white wealth, it would take multiple generations for Black people to even catch up as a whole, as an entire whole. It would take, I want to say 300 years, but I don't want to cite it off the record because I don't have that in front of me. But it multiple generations, and that's just blatantly ignored half the time, more than half the time, because a lot of people ignore wealth inequality in general, but obviously if you guys listen to the show, I don't, and I rail about it every freaking episode. But when it comes to race, it's extremely larger gap, and we just don't talk about it.
Right.
But
it's like they just tell you to do catch up, and it's like, I can't catch up because, like, okay, that's the best you got for me. Like, there's no real, and that's why I push so hard on this whole education thing. You know, we just, and you know, when we shout defund the police, it's like we're not saying, you know, like they're like too bad of people or whatever, but it's saying we're going to defund you and start reallocating this money into the things that really, really matter. That's going to be the change. So we don't always have to depend on the police to show up on the smallest things. You know, when I take my money and I put it into the education system, when you do that, I want my kids, or I want these kids to be getting the best education they possibly can. And not just the best education they possibly can. I don't want you to just be sugarcoating when you're teaching my children American history or just history in general. I want them to know the pain and the trauma that Black people went through. I want them to understand the trauma that the indigenous people go through. And I need people we need to have classes on this, because our hurt, Black hurt, is not just us not getting over slavery. From the moment you come out of your mother's womb as a Black woman or as a Black man, you're carrying that trauma and that pain from past trauma. And that goes even with things like the Holocaust. You know, you hear the saying, let's stop talking about slavery because it happened, we don't talk about it, but you know, we're getting taught about the Holocaust. Are you going to tell the Jews, you know, let's forget about the Holocaust, it already happened? You know, we have to just stop ignorance. We have to, because let me tell you something. When I said these problems were deeply rooted, I meant it. You know, we don't understand the psychological process of how to, we need to have a global forum. Like, we need to sit down and have this discussion, because it's important. And we have too many people who are older than us, who are just blinded with their ignorance. And, you know, enough is truly enough. And I'm grateful to have people like you who want to be in office, and other people who want to run an office in this generation, who will really be the people to make the change. Because if we don't make the change, I don't know who will. You know, we have our older generation, like you said, they're not doing enough. You know, they're hearing, but they're not really hearing, because, you know, they did grow up in ignorance in a time where it was, you know, where they didn't have to fight hard. So they're doing the bare minimum, you know. But we're here now, and because they chose not to fight as hard, the younger generation of Black people and minorities are suffering at the hand by that. So when, you know, we really have to step up. We have to rewrite these things and really, really utilize our knowledge and press for, you know, human rights for everyone equally. And it, you know, this is not, you know, people, you know, trying to say we want to be strictly socialist. No, you know, we could be capitalists and have our socialism thrown in there, because there's nothing wrong with that. Police, firefighters, you know, school itself, that's socialism, you know, it's socialism. So it's nothing wrong with that. But we have to understand that those things work, you know, throwing these things in there work. And I don't want to get too deep in here because I know me. But it we can't stop fighting for change until we actually see something. And I can't express this enough. People have to stop telling the younger generation how to fight, to comfort in the means of to comfort their means of how we should be doing things. It we tried your way and it didn't work. So we're going to try our way because, even though there's a little looting here and there, it's understood. And it's also being heard because change is happening. I hear people, stop knocking down statues. That's a part of our history. That's the problem now. That is the problem now. Keep knocking them down, okay? Listen, it really is time for a change because, I personally don't see it because, like I said, I have that privilege. I've had that privilege to be able to have a wealthy experience. And, I've had people tell me, I've lost friends for this, having to talk about race relations or whatever. And I've had friends say, well, you're more privileged than me. I'm like, listen, it's different because it took my grandparents and parents and people in my family years to get where they're at. This didn't come from generational wealth. They had to start our generational wealth. You have your grandparents who have been building on this. Your parents have been building so that you can have. But my grandparents and parents, they just start now because they were just given this information. People in my age, we're just learning about this stuff. So we're really playing a game of catch up while having people on our backs at the same time. So we need people in office who are not going to do the bare minimum. We need people who are going to make change and do it the right way so that when we advertise land of the free, home of the brave, the saying, we actually live up to that. Because right now we're, land of the ignorant and the malice and home of the greedy. So we have to live up to what we advertise. Yeah, enough is enough.
I'll just take this moment to quickly plug a previous interview I had with Jeff Kennedy, and we talked about the history from the New Deal and the Great Society and how we got here and where we were and in the past of the Democratic Party. Because I want to point out that I think, and I could be wrong, this is an opinion obviously, but I think why a lot of older Democratic officials feel the way they do and they fight the way they fight is because they feel like they are fighting. Because from Reagan, they got their ass whooped. Bush 1, not so much, but Bush Jr., we've been getting our ass kicked for, and I say we, but
right.
the people really have been getting their asses kicked since the 80s.
Right.
And I mean, that's not just one race or another. And that's, again, everything that happens when we talk about the New Deal didn't really include enough for, if any at all, for Black people. So that's why it's saying, like, we need to take what FDR did, the New Deal, we need to bring it into the 21st century and say, a Green New Deal, because one, it'll protect our environment. Two, it'll help people that lack the generational wealth that we need to build up. And we'll reduce wealth inequality, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We'll provide health care for everybody because all that intermingles. Every single issue intermingles with the culture and systems that oppress certain people. And like you also I forgot to say this earlier, but you talked about Jewish people and the Holocaust. And the fact is that there are people now that deny that it happens. Not that they ever, really went away, but people have lived through the Holocaust and people still to this day deny that it happened, or that they radically reduce the number of people that were killed because it fits their narrative and because they they believe and want to just believe this narrow thing, even though history is there is literal documented history that shows it. Not only the fact that people lived through it, but all the monuments, all of the things from that time that we still have today that can still prove it. Not that we should even have to prove that, but Jesus Christ, yeah, it's crazy.
Yes, we gaslight so much pain that people go through, and I'm telling you, enough is enough. It really is enough.
My last thing before we close, I just wanted to say, because I am an accounting major. I went to school. Well, I have an accounting degree.
Mm-hmm.
So when you said the line, "Black people don't have to fill out W-2s for being Black," that really was like, oh, that's a great line. That is amazing. And I might title this podcast that, because that was such a great line. But yeah, I mean, I think that's a great distinction of why saying Black Lives Matter matters, and why saying Blue Lives Matter doesn't, or All Lives Matter doesn't, because it takes away the inherent nature of, you are born the way you're born. You're born Black, or you're born white. You're not born a police officer.
Right.
So, and I think you walk that line very, very nicely in your speech, saying like, look, you have police officers in your family. I do in more of my extended family. I have friends and whatever. It's not saying that we hate police. Right. I actually think that if we reform the police and gave funding to social services and everything like that, we'd actually make the police's job easier.
Correct.
But
yes, we would.
But they choose that line of work, and that is a dangerous line of work.
Correct. But it is.
It is a choice, nonetheless.
Thank you. Yes.
So I just wanted to make sure I got that in there before we close up. And these conversations can go on and on and on, because I know when 2 weeks ago when I had my episode, I talked a lot more about like the history of certain things. If you guys listened to that one and you're listening to this one and you still didn't go look up what I told you to look up, the books in that, please do. Please go look up who Emmett Till was. Please go look up what happened to him. Please look up the actual truth about the Black Panthers. Please go look up
the actual truth.
Look up the radical nature of Martin Luther King Jr., because he wasn't just some milquetoast centrist who would be a Republican today, despite what people want to say about him. He was a radical, and that is a good thing. He was radical because he had to be radical in the time. He shouldn't be radical.
Correct. I say that all the time. I said things that people find radical now can be just later.
Yep.
So, people really have to check themselves. Listen.
And not to mention the fact that almost every single one of these civil rights leaders that we look up to today, their lives were ended early because they were assassinated.
Right.
They're literal martyrs. And I particularly loved reading Malcolm X's autobiography, and I suggest anyone that is listening to read that book as well. I would honestly start with that one. I think that that's a great way to start.
Yes.
But Martin Luther King Jr. has been whitewashed so much that we forget how radical he was and how revolutionary he was. And that's why we talked about the white modern in the beginning. The fact is that he was anti-war, anti-colonialism. He was pro universal basic income, which was just crazy to think about back then, especially. But just thing after thing after thing. He called himself a democratic socialist. We can get into the minutia. I'm going to do an episode soon about the differences between socialism, democratic socialism, social democracy. I personally am a social democrat, but because I do like, anyone knows me, knows that I like buying crap and just being in a capitalist society for certain things. But I don't believe that healthcare prisons, education, any of that stuff should be privatized and in a market. I think it should just be
especially prison.
Oh no! Oh, prison's the one that I think is the easiest to just knock out of the park logically. Just saying that you can't lock someone up and make profit off of it. It just doesn't make sense. Like just without even talking about the reforms of prisons.
Correct.
But we have the punitive system, and I think that to be more reformative. But not even diving into that argument. The fact is that people are making profits off of putting people in cages, and they're usually the least likely to commit a violent crime. They're almost always drug offenses, which don't even get me started there.
Listen, when you put a black man into the system, it is so hard to get them out of it. Black neighborhoods, they're over police. So when I say they are literally hawk watching you to see you do something to them that is illegal, your name's already there. All they got to do is put you back in and add another 10 years to your sentence. You're going to be there for a while. And the privatization of prisons, that to me is just so disgusting. The fact that you want to profit off of something that is, in my opinion, modern day slavery. And I encourage anyone who is watching this show to watch 13th on Netflix. Oh my, the logistics of it is amazing. The emotional side of it, amazing. Dig into that. Anything, just educate yourself on these things. There's so much ignorance built into stuff that, you don't even realize you're putting your money into,
Not only the free labor that prisoners perform, but again, I will emphasize this for anyone that's listening, they make profits off of it. It's not even like we're paying a general prison,
right?
And these people are working for free, which is wrong to begin with. But we're talking about people making a profit off of free labor and putting people in cages for smoking marijuana.
Crazy. Something that should be legalized at that.
Yeah.
Because if you do legalize it, I don't think people understand this. Like, legalizing marijuana will reduce a lot as well, reduce the crime and reduce the amount of drugs that Republicans think are coming through from the Mexican border. It's going to reduce all of that. And there's statistics to support that. Then but I feel like because this country, our so-called freedom was built on racism. So people don't want to see that end, people don't want to legalize marijuana because once you do that, then you lose your news cycle. You start losing your stories. You start losing the fact that we can no longer target Mexicans and Hispanics below the border because now we're not getting the drugs, yada, yada, yada. Now we can no longer have the news cycle of black men being arrested in prison because now it's legalized. It's sad because people don't want to see the change, and they don't want to see the good that certain things could do if you just open your eyes. Like it can change a lot. It really can.
I guess last question on my end would be what would you tell other young people to do, like say that they can't vote? Because I know, like, again, I'll emphasize Kaya's 17
and I will not be able to vote until 2024 for the presidential election.
So I'll ask you that, but I also want to point out to the audience that anyone that's listening, that if someone who's 17 can know all this stuff and just get engaged, then so can you.
Correct.
It's not, we all start at different levels and we all have different entry points. In my perspective, 6 years ago was different than it is now, but we all have to grow and we all have to find that perspective and that voice. But obviously, if you're listening to this and you're 18, please, 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 please vote. And please get involved with your local municipal groups for your Democratic Party. Most likely, I would suggest that because we can make change that way.
Correct.
Run for office. I mean, you guys have heard me say this stuff a million times if you've already listened to this. But Kaya, do you want to say what you think people should do that can't vote?
what you can do then when you can't vote. For like me in general, I am constantly educating myself on matters like these. So when I do get the opportunity to vote, I know who I'm going to vote for. And when you educate yourself on matters like these, now you know that you're not just going to vote for only the president. You're now going to vote for the people that represent your townships and your cities, because they represent your state. You know, it's one thing to have your federal government, but it's one thing to have the state government. These people are putting in the actions for what's going on in your state and for your townships. So now you have to educate yourself on the matters of what goes on in your town and your state. You start talking to people who are older than you. What are your experiences? You educate yourself on things such as the generational wealth and things that things of sort like that. So you just have to constantly educate yourself, because a lot of the things that we learn in school, it's good, you know, it's good, especially if you're up here, but you have to realize that we're not learning everything. And it's always good to dive in for yourself and take that next step, because once you get into this world, you know, it should automatically be in your head that when you see what's going wrong in this country, and let me tell you something, when you educate yourself, it stops a lot of ignorance within yourself. You know, once you check your privilege and you check your malice, you know, that's when you start having your eyes open to the issues that are actually going on in this country. And that's when you can make the effective change. So that's something I'm always going to push. Just educate yourself. You know, do the best you can to educate yourself. Sign petitions geared towards anything that's fighting for human rights, or even if it's just the little things, saving the planet, you know, doing things that are geared towards CO2 emissions, like, you know, the little things that you could do, like just sign petitions, engage yourself into these matters, because what seems like another person's problem is actually all of our problems. You know, once you dive into things that affect the world, you know, you're a part of something very big. So, but educate yourself, and just, yes, educate yourself, please, please, please. That is something I always push. Yes.
I completely agree. And I also will point out, you know, being that I'm the chair of my local Democratic Party, like if someone came to me, like technically you have to be a registered Democrat to like come to meetings and all that stuff. Like if you're under 18, I would ask to reach out to local municipal groups, because like you said, you're electing people. Like I have my poster behind me. I ran for Doylestown Township Supervisor, and I would have been able to pass things that are on the local level, and it works its way up. So you get to meet the people, you get to interact with those people, and especially if you're not 18 yet, you can learn a lot about the structure of your government before you actually get to vote, which I don't think many people do, and I wish I did. I really didn't learn about it until I moved back after college. But that, and get involved here in high school or middle school, whatever. There are groups always, whether that be Young Democrats or Sunrise Movement. There's always these groups that are at your high school, most likely. And if there isn't one, get your friends together and start one, because and I'm including myself with the youth because I'm only 24, but we are the future of this party and this country, and we have to take it into our own hands to change it if we want to have grandkids that can inherit this earth.
Correct.
And that we'd be lucky if we could go to Mars or whatever. I don't want to do that. I don't want to have to do that. I'd like to stay here, even if any of that stuff's possible. So just stay involved, and if you're not already involved, get involved. There are, and if you need someone to reach out to, you can always, and like I say, I always close out the show. If you have questions, if you have suggested guests, if you have topics you want me to cover, you can always reach out to me. I don't know everything, and you have to be able to admit that to yourself. But I will try to help anyone that needs this help to get involved, because we're all fighting for the common goal. So Kaya, I'll say thank you one more time for coming on. Is there a place where people can follow you, or do you want to promote anything? I know I have your that video of your speech that I'm gonna put with this at in like the comment section. But
well, my Instagram is xxix.monae, MONAE. My Facebook is Kaya, CHAYA, Bot, BAT, Adinah, ADINAH. And you can just follow me on those things, at me, whatever. I'll tell you now, my Facebook is family oriented as well as very political. I will admit, yes, I do slander Trump a lot on there.
I do that a lot on here too, so
yes,
don't worry.
they can. On Instagram, that's, a mix of selfies and a little video here on there on how I feel about certain issues. Definitely on my Insta story, that has been nonstop, constant, whether it be LGBTQ rights, Black rights, the fight for feeding the kids in Yemen, just listen, I try to be as active as I can and as vocal as I can when it comes to the human rights of those in this country and the rest of the world in general. But I would love to expand my platform. Eventually, I want to be an attorney, but just expanding my platform on issues like this. That speech I posted it up on YouTube, but I know for myself now that I really put myself out there, it's like, what is there to lose at this point? So I'm going to try my best to continue to expand my platform and just speaking out on social justice and giving out testimonials on what it's like to be a Black woman, and a Black Jewish woman at that, because I am Jewish. So listen, I get it handed to me a lot. So listen, but yes, thank you so much for having me on here. It was a pleasure. Listen, yes, I love conversations like this. It's good to have your little talks, but things about changing the world that is much bigger than little conversation.
Even an hour is not enough for these things, but the little sound bites are not even close to enough. But like, that's why I talk about things like when I talk about wealth inequality, or we talk about defunding the police, like these are just phrases. So we have to always go deeper, and we have to dig into what we mean by that. So
correct.
Thank you one more time for coming on. If you guys are listening, please do check out the other episodes of the Kano Show. I would really appreciate it. Like, share, and follow us. I think I do it on Spotify. You can follow me, which is interesting because it's me personally. But follow me on Twitter at Con O'Hanlon, CONOHANLON, and do all those things. And I will see you guys next time. And you guys can always email, comment, send any sort of topics or guest suggestions that you want to have on here, and I appreciate it. So I will see you guys next time.